Hi, and welcome to another episode Around the Neighborhood with me, Scott McMahon. And this is the show about the quest for fun, history, and mystery in our backyards. And today I'm in West Linn, taking a stroll down to West Linn High School, home of the Lions. And I figure I'd take advantage of the school celebrating the Centennial Class of 2020, which my daughter happens to be part of as a graduating senior. Yes, it was 100 years ago that the first graduating class came through West Linn High School. However, at the time of this recording, the whole world is dealing with the quarantine from the COVID-19 virus. So it remains to be seen if there will actually be any graduation ceremony in the coming months or not. And these are definitely unprecedented times for sure. Anyway, before we get down to the high school, we're going to pass Sunset Primary School, which is the first school built in this area way back in 1890. And Sunset was unique because it was the first school that offered a school bus. The school bus was a horse and wagon, but still, it got kids to school, right? There was an old log cabin in the Stafford area, which some say was the actual first school in the area, but it's safe to say that Sunset was the first officially built school in this area. In August of 1919, there was an article in the Oregon City Enterprise that announced the opening of Union High School in September 1919. Yes, the school was originally named Union High School since it was the only high school outside of Portland proper at the time. The school will later be named West Linn Union High School, then Oswego West Linn High School, and finally in 1938, West Linn High School. Apparently, there is one remaining relic from the original building, and that is a white window stored in the Hall of Fame display case. And I wish I had an opportunity to go inside and check it out, but with the quarantine lockdown and all, we're kind of have to admire it from the outside for today. Even though the school opened in September 1919, as I understand it, there was no graduating class of 1919, which is why they are celebrating the 100th anniversary for the graduates in 2020. Again, with the lockdown in place, even the West Linn High School Century Celebration event has been postponed indefinitely, which meant that all the past staff and alumni and community that was supposed to attend will have to wait until it gets rescheduled. With over 100 years of history here, I'm sure there are a lot of stories that can be shared. So if you feel inclined to share some, please do in the comment section of this video. And if you want to take a stroll down memory lane, the school district has an amazing resource for all the old yearbooks in digital formats on their website. And I'll leave a link in the description in case you want to check them out. Since my daughter is part of the journalism class, she and her colleagues were able to do a lot of the research for me at the school's paper, The Amplifier, so it helps me out in this video quite a bit. So there are some interesting stories about past students who attended West Linn High School. In the first graduating class of 1920, the first female editor of the school newspaper was Clara Costley, who also happened to be the first May Queen. Actually, the first graduating class were all women. Then in 1923, the paper was called the UHS Amplifier for Union High School. What's neat is that the name of the school paper hasn't changed in 100 years. Anyway, some of the interesting stories back in 1923 was why students should shovel snow from the sidewalks. In 1945, the school paper even had a column entitled Around the School, just like the show Around the Neighborhood. Anyway, the author of the column had a distinct interest in girls from Oregon City, prompting an anonymous author to write, "Why don't you give West Linn girls a chance?" In 1978, West Linn High School not only had its first person of color to be named student body president, but she was also the first person of color to be named editor-in-chief for the school newspaper, and her name was Camille Hamilton. Her mother, Midori Minamoto, was Japanese American, and her father, H.G. Belton Hamilton, was African American. Additionally, Camille's father was the first black judge in Oregon and one of the first black graduates from Stanford. Now, Camille would graduate and attend UCLA and then Stanford, where she became a judge in San Francisco, where she lives today. It's pretty impressive. I think most parents are just hoping their kids graduate knowing how to wash their own laundry. Originally, I was hoping to have a special guest join me for this episode, journalist and author Cornelia Becker Senior, and who wrote the book West Linn, which is part of the Images of America series you've probably seen at bookstores. But with the ordinance to stay away from each other, I figured it'd be better if I did this video solo for today. It's a great book, so I'll leave the links in the description where to get it at Powell's Books Online to help them out if you can. In the book, Cornelia describes how the high school was originally built as a temporary building next to Willamette Grade School, while the construction for the actual building was being completed on A Street back in 1919. High school students in 1921 entered through the new building that was lined with the tall white pillars. But in 1923, another building was constructed, so there was a gap between the two buildings, but it was still the high school, just two separate buildings. Between the 1950s and the 1960s, the school will go through variations of a turnaround in front of the high school, which I believe where the original lion statue mascot was located and is still here today. I'm not sure if there was two of them or just one, but if you know, please leave a comment in the section of the video. Speaking of the 1950s, there used to be a small snack shop called the Lion's Den here, where the New Life Church stands today. So how cool would it have been to go back in the 1950s to grab yourself a soda pop? I used to refer to it as a pop because my dad turned me on to The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, and Ricky Nelson would refer to his dad as Pops.
Hey, take it easy, will you? What's all the noise about?
Oh, were you talking too loud, Pop?
Are you kidding? Is this one of your friendly little discussions?
Yes, sir. That's what I can't understand. How can anybody be as smart as you and have a son as dumb as David?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
And I started to call my dad Pops too. Looking at the old yearbooks, it just reminds me of that show, Ozzie and Harriet, and what used to be here called the Lion's Den. Unfortunately, we couldn't get an inside tour, you know, with the quarantine and all, and I'm not too sure when the high school is going to open. So, in the meantime, why don't we just take a little fly around the high school? Well, I hope you like this episode, and since the show is sponsored by my real estate services, all my contact information is in the description of this video in case you are looking to buy or sell a home in the near future. And please let me know if you have any questions, especially during these unprecedented times. Until then, I hope to see you soon around the neighborhood. It's been a real bummer with all the stuff that's happened, of course, for a lot of different people. But for these seniors, including my daughter, a little bit disappointed. Doesn't look like, you know, there may not be a graduation ceremony. Prom may be called off. She won't be able to go to prom. I don't think she's ever been to prom before. So things like that have been weighing heavy on some of the high school seniors, and I'm sure the staff and the rest of the community as well. So here's a little bit of history that not a lot of people know because I think they just drive right by it. Just around the corner from the high school at the corner of Sunset Avenue and Willamette Falls Drive is this little hole in the wall, which happens to be a historic watering hole for the horses and mules before they went to the top of Sunset where the primary school is located. So there you go, a little bit of history that you might not know about if you were just driving by this area, a little historic watering hole.